Good morning, it's 7 o'clock. You're watching the Only Breakfast Show live from Westminster. After weeks of deliberation, the EU has for now stopped short of imposing export curbs on vaccine doses as it attempts to remedy its slow-moving rollout. This morning, we'll ask what last night's virtual EU Council meeting means for the UK and whether it's the win-win outcome that was aimed for. Also this morning, the World War II veteran who's completing a lockdown cycle challenge as he celebrates his 100th birthday.
From now, I shan't touch them. Instead, I'll keep my hands a little way above them the whole time. Watch this.
At 10:15, we'll be finding out if online magic shows can do the trick. It's Friday, the 26th of March. The EU warns Astrazeneca to fulfil its vaccine contracts with Europe, as the Commission President claims she's seen no deliveries arrive from the UK.
I have no knowledge so far of UK exports. Perhaps I'm mistaken and waiting for that transparency.
Hitting back, China sanctions more than a dozen individuals and organisations in the UK after Britain took similar action over concerns about human rights abuses. The NSPCC says platforms owned by Facebook are being used in more than half of online child sex crimes. Grounded, the RAF pauses flights of Hawk T1 jets after a crash in Cornwall which left 2 pilots in hospital. A message to take to the Oscars. We speak to Kerry Mulligan and director Emerald Fennell on their film tackling predatory behaviour towards women.
And it's turning briefly colder over the next 24 hours with wintry showers for some. I'll have the details for you later in the programme.
Good morning. The EU has warned Astrazeneca it must fulfil its contracts with Europe before sending vaccines elsewhere. But officials stopped short of immediately introducing export restrictions. The EU had touted imposing export curbs on vaccines, with the continent's vaccination programme lagging behind the UK's. Instead, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen ordered Astrazeneca to catch up with orders it's promised to Europe. She also called for transparency from other countries, saying she had no knowledge of the UK exporting doses to the bloc. From Brussels, our Europe correspondent Michelle Clifford reports.
The residents of Brussels were probably glad it was a virtual summit this time round. There was none of the usual traffic chaos and congestion when EU leaders descend. But the lunchtime customers seeking out some of the city's famous fries were all too aware their Prime Minister and others were busy talking. And about what? Vaccines, or rather a lack of them, and what to do to get more.
I hope it's going to arrive sooner and we're going to get vaccinated soon.
It should be a worldwide agreement so that everybody has the same chance to be vaccinated.
We had several times Astrazeneca and Pfizer who said, yeah, we cannot deliver to Europe because we don't have any more.
Nearby, a long queue for vaccinations, which have been rolled out more slowly than people would have liked and much more slowly than across the Channel. The UK's success at inoculating citizens is well known here and around the EU and will have focused the minds of leaders as they met remotely to discuss COVID and agreed to tightening vaccine export rules.
We want to make sure that Europe gets its fair share of vaccines, because we must be able to explain to our citizens that if companies export their vaccines to the whole world, it is because they are fully honouring their commitments and it does not risk security of supply in the European Union.
Days of tension had been growing between the EU and UK over the issue of exports. The European Commission saying millions of doses have been sent across the Channel with no vaccines coming in the other direction.
I have no knowledge so far of UK exports. Perhaps I'm mistaken and waiting for that transparency. And the same goes for many other regions in the world.
Leaders agreed to step up production of vaccines and improve rollout and were joined for a time by US President Joe Biden, who has his own COVID difficulties at home. And whilst there has been EU-UK acrimony, the two sides have agreed to try to work together to expand supplies for all citizens. That didn't stop France's president taking a swipe at some on the UK side. Not politicians, but the press.
que l'Europe n'est pas un continent égoïste.
Europe is not a selfish continent. I think it's important because when I read the press across the channel, they say that it's the EU being selfish. This is false.
Faux.
A note of positivity, but who knows how long it will last if export issues ultimately interrupt the vaccine programme beyond EU shores. Michelle Clifford, Sky News, Brussels.
Well, Alistair Bunkle is in Brussels for us now. And Ali, does this now mean that the UK vaccine rollout programme will be unaffected?
No, I think it's far too early to have any kind of definitive conclusion about what it means for the UK and indeed for the EU. I mean, what I would say in positive terms, aside from that sort of one slightly snarky remark from Ursula von der Leyen that Michelle had in her report there about waiting to see figures from the UK. On the whole, the language was more directed at Astrazeneca as the vaccine manufacturer rather than the United Kingdom. So I think talks continue between the UK and the EU to see how they can achieve their so-called win-win situation, something I think most people think is probably impossible. But not just that dispute. Actually, the EU arguably has greater trouble on its hands internally. There is real disgruntlement between a lot of states that they are not getting their fair share of the vaccine from within, particularly Austria. The Austrian Premier, Sebastian Kurz, really annoying quite a lot of his fellow leaders during the video summit yesterday by saying that Austria should be on the priority list, something that Angela Merkel completely disagrees with. So not only is the EU fighting to secure more vaccines, it also has a fight within as to how those vaccines are distributed.
Alistair, thank you. Well, the Housing Secretary, Robert Jenrick, joins me now. Good morning to you. So the EU stopped short of an export ban to the UK. Can you therefore assure people that they will get their vaccinations on time in this country?
Yes, I can. We are on course to meet both of our targets, that all the over 50s and those with clinical vulnerabilities will be vaccinated, or at least with their first jab, by the middle of April, and that all adults will get their vaccination by the end of July. We've got line of sight. We know we've got the supplies ahead to deliver on those two critical targets. But look, we are continuing to talk to our partners in the European Union. None of us want to see any harm to international supply chains. We've got to work together and cooperate to ensure that we can get the vaccine and we can have a win-win situation for both the UK and the European Union.
Ursula von der Leyen says she hasn't seen any vaccines exported from the UK. Have we exported any vaccines?
Well, vaccines are based on complex international supply chains. There are elements of the vaccines being produced in the UK, there are elements being produced in parts of the European Union, and indeed all over the world. We're working with the Serum Institute, for example, in India. So it is critical for all countries that there are free flow of medical products, including vaccines, across international borders. And it would be very damaging if countries started to pull up drawbridges and prevent vaccines, medicines, or elements of them crossing international borders. And the UK strongly opposes that.
Would the UK ever consider blocking vaccines to the EU, though, if they decided to have an export ban?
Well, I'm not going to get into that kind of talk. I think that's unhelpful. We will continue to discuss the situation with the European Union to encourage them to stick to the very clear commitments that they gave just a few weeks ago, which were that existing contractual obligations will be honoured, that vaccines and other medicines can cross borders unhindered. That's absolutely critical. And of course, we'll continue working with the fantastic manufacturers like Astrazeneca that deserve our support in light of all that they're doing to produce vaccines, protect us from the virus, and help us to move forward.
You mentioned a short while ago India, the largest producer of vaccines in the world. They are not going to be exporting vaccines to us for at least 2 to 3 months, we're told. Surely that is going to have some bearing on our supply.
Well, we've built an infrastructure in this country which really is world-class. It would enable us to vaccinate even more people than we have done in recent weeks, millions more people. And so the more vaccines we can secure, the more jabs can go into people's arms. But we do have enough supply in sight to continue to meet our obligations. So that means that if you have an appointment for your second jab, you should not be worried. That will be honoured. You will get that jab on the date that you were provided. And we will meet those two critical targets, as I said, the 15th of April for the over 50s, plus the clinically extremely vulnerable, and the rest of the population, the adult population, by the end of July. And so we'll continue to be one, if not the leading country in the world for the vaccine rollout. But if we can secure more supply, and we're confident that we will do, incidentally, in the months ahead, then we can continue to increase the pace, which is critical, because the vaccine at the end of the day is our route out of this situation.
Let's move on to this programme to support vulnerable families. How is it going to factor in the pandemic? You're saying that £165 million is going to be assigned to this.
Well, we've for many years been working with families through a programme that's well known called Troubled Families. And today we're deciding to recreate that programme, renew it and refresh it in light of the pandemic. And it's going to be called Supporting Families. And it aims to bring together all of the different agencies of government, from schools, local councils, the NHS, GPs, to support families as a unit and make sure that they have the wraparound care and support that they need to tackle many different challenges as we come out of the pandemic, ensuring that fewer children go into care, that more children can stay in school and thrive as they go back to face-to-face teaching, that we look after people's health, including their mental health, and we help more people back into the workplace. I think this sort of programme has never been more important, and so it's right that we invest in it, and we're aiming to directly support at least 69,000 families this year, potentially far more than that, and ensure that those families get the care, the support and the guidance that they need to thrive in the months and years ahead.
Can I just ask you about the Batley Grammar School and the incident there? Was the teacher right to show a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad to children?
Well, I don't know precisely what the teacher did in the classroom. We know that the school is looking into the matter and investigating, and that's absolutely right. The Department for Education is liaising with the school and with the local council. What I can say is that there has to be an appropriate balance. We have to ensure that there is free speech, that teachers can teach uninhibited, but that has to be done in a respectful and tolerant way. And that's a balance that's to be struck by teaching professionals and by the schools concerned. What I would also add is that I was disturbed to see scenes of people protesting outside the school. That is not right. We shouldn't have teachers, members of the staff of schools feeling intimidated. And the reports that a teacher may even be in hiding is very disturbing. That is not a road that we want to go down in this country. So I would strongly urge people who are concerned about this issue not to do that.
Robert Jenrick, Housing Secretary, thank you very much for speaking to us this morning. Still to come on the show, as the NSPCC reports more than half of online child sex crimes are on Facebook's platforms, I'll be asking a former government advisor on online child safety what can be done to tackle the issue. That's at 7:30. At 7:45, we'll be finding out how we can best help university students after a year of disruption and stress. What's the best way of ensuring everybody gets the vaccine as early as possible? Dr. Sarah Schiffling is an expert in vaccine supply and will join me at just after 8 o'clock. Chinese officials have imposed sanctions on a number of British MPs and organisations in the UK. It's in response to sanctions introduced by Britain against individuals from China because of concerns over human rights issues in Xinjiang. Well, our Asia correspondent Tom Cheshire joins me now from Beijing. And Tom, this has ratcheted up the situation. What's the likely response to be from the UK?
Well, I think China would frame this as a retaliatory measure. What's quite interesting is this is a response to UK sanctions, the first UK sanctions imposed on Chinese government officials. That was unveiled on Monday, and that happened in concert with the EU, with the US, with Canada. They all unveiled sanctions at the same time. But I don't think China was necessarily expecting the UK to unveiled those sanctions. When the EU applied its sanctions, China straight away applied sanctions to members of the European Parliament, other organisations in Europe. It's taken a lot longer for them to get around to the UK, but they have applied it now. And they say it's because of these people maliciously spreading lies and disinformation. It targets MPs in the UK, including Ian Duncan Smith, the former Conservative leader, but also organisations, as you say, including the China Research Group, a mainly Conservative group of MPs focused on China, and also Essex Court Chambers, which is a barrister's firm which put out a legal opinion saying what's happening in Xinjiang in northwest China with the Uyghur people could constitute genocide. So this is China really pushing back. And we've seen that all week, actually, both in terms of responding to those EU sanctions, but also there's a boycott at the moment of Western clothing companies, including H&M and Nike. It has been sort of spun as an organic boycott, a spontaneous boycott. It's got a lot of backing from state media. And these companies have pledged not to use material from Xinjiang because of the allegations of forced labour in that region. And as a result, Chinese consumers are saying they won't shop there. They're getting a lot of airtime there. And that looks like a sort of concerted campaign here in China to push back against those sanctions, against those allegations of forced labour. So this is really China doubling down. It doesn't look like it's going to change any of its behaviour, any of its policies towards the Uyghur people in Xinjiang. This is them drawing a line both for individuals, for governments, for politicians, but also businesses who try and cross that line.
Tom, thank you. More than half of online child sex crimes recorded by police in England and Wales took place on Facebook-owned platforms, according to the figures published by the NSPCC. The charity says Instagram is being used most commonly. And as Ashna Huranag reports, the NSPCC is concerned cases could go unreported if the company goes forward with its plans for end-to-end encryption.
Frida was groomed online from the age of 13 by a stranger in his 30s. We're not using her name to protect her identity. Their messages were constant and at times dangerous.
He was asking for more explicit content from me, and we're having more explicit conversations and everything. And at this point, he wanted to transition over to WhatsApp. And I started sending him explicit photos because that was what he wanted.
The encryption of messaging services allows every conversation to be private and untraceable, making it harder to police child abuse and grooming online.
It felt more intense and intimate there, and I was less worried about the things I was sending him getting elsewhere.
The NSPCC says the privacy it allows risks fueling child abuse. Last year, police recorded more than 9,400 instances where online communication was being used to commit sexual or indecent image offences against under 18s. 52% took place on Facebook-owned apps, with Instagram the most used platform, accounting for a third of all incidents. The charity fears many of these could go unreported if end-to-end encryption is expanded across more platforms without safeguards in place.
What Facebook wants to press ahead and do is to put a blindfold on itself. It means that abusers really will be able to groom children, to be able to share child abuse images, safe in the knowledge that the chances of that activity, those criminal deeds being detected, is very low indeed. We have to see really effective legislation that ensures that children's safety is not just a voluntary consideration.
A government spokesperson told us the burden to protect children will fall solely on social media companies to prove they're doing all they can to keep children safe, and they will not be able to use encryption as an excuse. Tech companies must put public safety at the heart of their system designs or face heavy fines. We approached Facebook for comment, but they have yet to respond. For many, children's safety remains a priority, when so often the danger they face in the modern world is on the other end of a screen. Ashna Huranag, Sky News.
Time now for a look at the morning's other main stories for you. And the stay local order will be lifted in Wales tomorrow, meaning there'll be no domestic travel restrictions for the first time since it entered lockdown on December the 20th. First Minister Mark Drakeford has confirmed people will also be able to stay in self-contained holiday accommodation. Police have arrested 2 people in connection with an outbreak of COVID-19 at a care home in Devon. 9 deaths have been reported at Homesley Care Home in Sidford in the last month, which are all believed to be COVID-related. A 57-year-old woman from Sidmouth and a 30-year-old man from Exeter have been arrested on suspicion of willful neglect. Lorry drivers arriving in the UK could be subject to mass testing for coronavirus under new government plans. According to a report in the Daily Telegraph, officials will announce this weekend that those previously exempted, including hauliers and border force officers, will have to take a test once they're in Britain rather than at the border to avoid delays. Rishi Sunak has called on employers to end working from home and allow staff back in the office or risk them defecting to rival employers. The Chancellor said working in an office is crucial for young people to get to know colleagues and seek out mentors to help their career. Let's take a look now at the latest coronavirus figures for the UK. 6,397 new COVID-19 cases have been reported, with 63 more deaths across the UK. That takes the total number of people who've died to 126,445. The figures also show that 28.99 million first doses of a vaccine have now been given. It could take weeks to reopen the Suez Canal as one of the world's largest container ships remains beached across the whole width of the waterway. Salvage experts are trying to work out how to free the ship, the Ever Given, which is stacked high with cargo. Dozens of ships are now queuing up behind the marooned vessel. Well, the Suez Canal, which provides a vital link between the Red Sea and the Mediterranean, carries more than a tenth of all global trade and has been a key artery for the world economy for around 150 years. Ivor Bennett reports.
A team of tugboats was put to work on the stricken container ship, but despite the considerable power of their combined engines, the Ever Given didn't budge. Wedged across the Suez Canal, the scale of the problem dwarfing the machines that had been seen as a solution. The company trying to free the ship warned it could remain here for weeks, creating a nightmare scenario for global trade. The traffic jam it's created is already more than 150 ships long, among their cargo oil, gas and grains. One of the world's busiest shipping lanes at a standstill, this is the maritime equivalent of a blocked coronary artery.
A hiccup like this sort of sets everyone back. Everyone was already scrambling to get back to normal and serve what has been quite strong demand for traded goods. And yeah, no one needs another delay on top of everything else. And it does underline just how important and how finely balanced the whole system is.
The British government said the incident could cause delays for UK-bound deliveries, while the Japanese owner of the quarter-mile-long ship apologised for the disruption. It was supposedly caused by the vessel being blown off course by a sudden strong wind and a dust storm, but experts say that's nothing new.
These vessels are built for that, and these vessels are capable of handling that. So that could have been one of the major factors that contributed for it, it also depends on the skill level of the helmsman who is on the wheel.
Even at high tide, the efforts to refloat the Ever Given were futile. Salvage experts and canal officials are now considering removing containers to make it easier to shift. But with up to 20,000 on board, this is no quick fix. Ivor Bennett, Sky News.
The Ministry of Defence says all Hawk T1 planes, the type of jet used by the Red Hours, have been grounded after a Royal Navy jet crashed in Cornwall yesterday. 2 pilots are currently recovering in hospital after ejecting before a crash landing. My reporter Milena Veselinovic joins me now. Milena, first of all, tell us about the condition of the pilots and any subsequent investigation.
Well, thankfully, the pilots did not receive any significant injury and they are in stable condition, according to the police. We know they were initially treated at the scene and then they were airlifted to a hospital in Plymouth. And the Ministry of Defence says that they decided to ground this type of aircraft as a precautionary measure while the investigations are ongoing. And while the pilots thankfully seem to be okay, the ejection seat company manufacturer said that this was the first time in 18 years that the Royal Navy aircraft had to eject a seat. So they are taking this seriously. And of course, this is the same type of aircraft, the Hawk T1 jet, that the Red Arrows also use. And they are really the public face of the RAF and one of the world's premier aerobatics display teams. Now, they normally start training in October, and they would be using this time for valuable practice ahead of their summer display season. However, you know, as everything with coronavirus, that timetable has been appended, and there's no set events as of yet for 2021. But certainly, the longer that this jet remains grounded, the more valuable time they will lose in practice. And the Ministry of Defence has said that they will continue reviewing the situation and evaluating it as more information comes to light.
Lena, thank you. Time now for a look at the weather with Naz. One out, next one in. What's it going to look like today?
A bit like that for today, actually. One in, one out. Well, first out will be a band of rain sweeping south and eastwards. Then coming in will be some showers, some of them wintry, and it will be turning colder as well.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Good morning. So we're entering a brief cold spell now, lasting about 24 hours or so, and it will be turning quite cold. In fact, the showers that will be flowing through with the cooler airflow will also turn increasingly wintry as well. Currently, though, it's a fairly mild start to the day. We've got spells of rain across parts of central, southern and western Scotland, spreading to northern and western parts of England and Wales. It will continue spreading its way south and eastwards through today, down towards parts of the Midlands, central, southern and eastern England this afternoon. Therefore, it is becoming brighter, as you can see, for many areas. But we've already got blustery showers across northern and western parts that are already turning wintry over the high ground of Scotland. And they will become more widespread this afternoon across much of Northern Ireland, Scotland and northern western parts of England and Wales. And as you can see, turning increasingly wintry. Now, mostly across the high ground, any sleet and snow showers, but may even be as far south as parts of Wales. And then through the day, it will turn more wintry across some low levels of the north, especially so into tonight, where there will be the risk of ice as well across the northwest and widespread frost too.
The EU has warned Astrazeneca it must fulfil its contracts with Europe before sending vaccines elsewhere. But officials stopped short of immediately introducing export restrictions. Speaking to us earlier, the Housing Secretary, Robert Jenrick, said he was confident the UK will hit all its vaccine targets and urged the EU to stick to its commitments.
We will continue to discuss the situation with the European Union to encourage them to stick to the very clear commitments that they gave just a few weeks ago, which were that existing contractual obligations will be honoured, that vaccines and other medicines can cross borders unhindered. The more vaccines we can secure, the more jabs can go into people's arms. But we do have enough supply in sight to continue to meet our obligations. So that means that if you have an appointment for your second jab, you should not be worried. That will be honoured. You will get that jab on the date that you were provided, and we will meet those two critical targets, as I said, the 15th of April for the over 50s, plus the clinically extremely vulnerable, and the rest of the population, the adult population, by the end of July.
President Biden has come under pressure on migration during his first news conference since moving into the White House. There's been a surge of migrants since his election, which he insists is largely down to the cooler conditions in January and February. Mr. Biden also used the news conference to set an increased vaccine target of delivering 200 million COVID-19 jabs in his first 100 days. Our US correspondent Cordelia Lynch reports.
It took 64 days to get there, and Joe Biden tried to craft the opening with a boost.
We will, by my 100th day in office, have administered 200 million shots in people's arms. That's right, 200 million shots in 100 days. I know it's ambitious, twice our original goal, but no other country in the world has even come close, not even close.
But on the border, an emerging problem with far less progress. The president called crowded border facilities unacceptable. though denied the recent surge in migrants was down to a perception he is a soft touch.
I'd like to think it's because I'm a nice guy, but it's not. It's because of what's happened every year. Let me say one other thing on this. If you take a look at the number of people who are coming, the vast majority, the overwhelming majority of people coming to the border and crossing are being sent back.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
Such is the curse of the Washington bubble. He's already being asked if he'll be back in 4 years' time.
Have you decided whether you are going to run for re-election in 2024? You haven't set up a re-election campaign yet, as your predecessor had by this time.
My predecessor needed to. My predecessor. Oh, God, I miss him. No, the answer is yes. My plan is to run for re-election. That's my expectation.
On foreign policy expectations, he painted a portrait of a complex relationship with China's leader, Xi Jinping.
Doesn't have a Democratic with a small d bone in his body, but he's a smart guy. He's one of the guys like Putin who thinks that autocracy is the wave of the future. Democracy can't function in an ever complex world. But folks, I'm going. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
A quick exit for a man who wants to limit his stage time and deliver more than he promises. Cordelia Lynch, Sky News, Washington.
The University of Southern California has agreed to pay more than $1.1 billion to patients treated by a former campus gynecologist accused of sexual abuse. 74-year-old George Tyndall is to face trial after being charged with sexually assaulting 21 female patients, allegations he denies. It's the biggest sex abuse-linked payout in higher education history.
This will no longer be tolerated. USC is not the only university that has a dirty doctor. UCLA has one. We know that there was one at Johns Hopkins. We know there was one at Michigan State, Larry Nassar. This needs to change. This is a phenomenon in medicine that needs to be exposed.
USC preferred to spend massive amounts of money on damage control and on their fancy lawyers, and they really told us just to move on. They didn't want to reckon with decades of senseless horror that they had allowed to go on with their knowledge.
At least 5 people have been killed by tornadoes sweeping across Alabama, toppling trees and demolishing homes. As many as 8 tornadoes have hit parts of the Deep South, leaving more than 20,000 people without power. 3 of those killed were members of the same family. People in Gibraltar will be free to walk around without a mask from Sunday, as most of the population has now been vaccinated. New coronavirus infections in the British territory have plummeted, with none reported on Wednesday. A nighttime curfew has now been lifted, allowing bars and restaurants to stay open until 2 a.m. A British film about female grief and vengeance is one of the frontrunners for this year's Oscars. But the impact of Promising Young Woman is likely to be felt for far longer than the awards season, because it tackles the subject of men's predatory behaviour towards women. Here's our entertainment reporter, Claire Gregory.
I think you should go.
But a second ago, you were determined for me to stay.
I'm a nice guy.
Are you?
It's the story of a woman avenging the rape of her best friend. As well as being part of the awards conversation with 6 BAFTA and 5 Oscar nominations, it's triggered a conversation that goes much deeper, an all too familiar tale of predatory behaviour.
People feel very strongly about the movie, just really quite simply the use of alcohol in, in inverted commas, seduction. Because absolutely, when I was growing up, it was a joke. It was a sort of banter to get girls drunk and take them home. Women were kind of forced to either be quiet about it or join in on the joke because nobody would listen and nobody else cared. It's disturbing because it is very, very common.
What are you doing?
In casting actors known for playing good guys, the film sends a message about perception versus reality, raising questions over societal attitudes and complicity.
We've all grown up watching
this story told through a different lens. So I think it's sort of understandable that we've normalised it so much. This is a film that really does speak to everybody and everybody's part in this.
How did last night end?
The latest in a number of dramas to examine abusive behaviour, like Michaela Cole's I May Destroy You and Billy Piper's I Hate Susie, the film treads the line between entertainment and commentary while tackling pertinent issues.
This is coming out 4 years after the #MeToo reckoning, and it's a conversation that we shouldn't let slide. We need to keep it going because actually things haven't been changing for women who have felt frustration, anger, and I suppose this collective grief is something that they can relate to.
Do you still have feelings for Andrew?
Director Emerald Fennell, known for writing Killing Eve and for her role in The Crown, has made history with this as one of 2 women Oscar-nominated for Best Director. But her biggest success may be that this contributes to a power shift in Hollywood, allowing more women to tell their own stories.
He needs brains. They never did a girl any good.
Claire Gregory, Sky News.
Returning now to one of our main stories this morning, as we've been reporting, new figures published by the NSPCC suggest that more than half of online child sex crimes recorded by police in England and Wales took place on Facebook-owned platforms, with Instagram the most commonly used. And I'm joined now by the Secretary of the UK Children's Charities Coalition on Internet Safety, John Carr, who also used to advise the government on the issue. Good morning to you. What impact, in your estimation, has social media and the internet had on the rate of child sexual abuse?
Well, it's completely transformed it. I mean, it's always been there, unfortunately. It's always been a feature of our society, but the arrival of the internet has put it on steroids, so to speak. And the evidence of that is available here in NSPCC statistics. But this isn't the only piece of evidence, Matt, let me just say. Because Facebook is an American company subject to American federal law, it has to report every single incidence of an illegal child sex abuse image or an attempt to groom a child to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in Washington, D.C. And last year, that centre received 21.7 million reports covering 35 million videos of child sex abuse and 33 million still pictures, and 93% of those were on Facebook.
So, therefore, what does Facebook need to do to stop this happening?
Well, Facebook is about to make it a great deal worse. At the moment, because of the US federal law and because of the way Facebook, I'm glad to say, cooperate with the British police, they do make reports whenever they find these materials, which is why NSPCC can produce these numbers today. But what Facebook is planning to do is introduce what they call strong encryption on the Facebook Messenger and Instagram Direct platforms. And what that means is all of these images will become invisible to Facebook, which means they won't be able to find them, they won't be able to report them. And so these images of children being raped will continue to be circulated. These instances of children being groomed by paedophiles or bullied or whatever it might be will still happen. And Facebook won't be able to see them and won't be able to do anything about them.
And has the case been put to Facebook, the NSPCC, organisations like that? Has they put the case to them that encryption will actually make it a more dangerous area for young people?
Repeatedly. And Facebook acknowledge that that's what will happen. But what Facebook say is that the market, in inverted commas, demands greater privacy, which is why they are introducing strong encryption. They say they're going to do other things to try and stop these things happening before they get, as it were, into Messenger or into Instagram Direct. But the simple truth, which they are not denying, is that once these images or once these messages go into an encrypted environment, they will be invisible. And there's nothing that the company can do to change that, because that's just the way encryption works. And frankly, it is unacceptable. And we want the government to hurry up and publish the online harms bill that's been talking about for over 3 years now, And in that bill, it must create a very explicit legal obligation on all companies and say, if you're going to use strong encryption, okay, in principle, we don't have an issue with that, but you must show us that you're able to do it in a way that guarantees children can be kept safe.
So you're obviously not persuaded by the company's assurances that they have other measures that can keep children safe?
Absolutely not. And one of the reasons I'm not persuaded, by the way, is, and in a way, let's be fair to Facebook, we only know about these numbers because they're being reported in environment, and they can only be reported because these environments are not currently encrypted. Look at Apple. Look at some other companies where their services are already encrypted, and the number of reports being received from them are very close to zero. WhatsApp, which is actually also owned by Facebook, but was already encrypted. I think last year there were only something like 200 reports coming out of WhatsApp. And that's because Facebook can't see anything that's happening on WhatsApp. Now, I'm in favor of privacy. Don't get me wrong. We need privacy for banking, for security of nuclear reactors, national infrastructure. There's no issue in principle about the importance of privacy. But if you introduce it in these mass environments, these mass messaging environments, where you've no idea who the people are coming on, and you know that paedophiles and other people who are interested in exchanging illegal sexual content about children, if you know that they're there, why would you do it? Particularly, as I might say, why do people feel we need more privacy? We need more privacy because of the behavior of companies like Facebook. So they create the problem and then they come up with the wrong solution.
John Carr, thank you very much for sharing your insight on this particular story. Quite worrying trends there. Thank you.
Rain will spread southeastwards this afternoon over the Midlands, central, southern and eastern England. Elsewhere, we'll see blustery showers in between sunny spells, turning increasingly wintry, especially over the high ground. It'll be colder through the day as well. So, taking a look at the air pollution levels on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being very high, most places will remain at a low level of 1 to 3 again, but coastal parts of the north and west of the UK and Ireland will see occasionally moderate levels where it'll be windy.
The Air Quality Report, sponsored by Philips Air Purifiers.
Now, what's the best way to help university students after a year of stress and disruption? Universities UK, which represents institutions across the country, says the government must not take students' resilience for granted. The president of Universities UK, Professor Julia Buckingham, who's also the Vice-Chancellor of Brunel University in London, joins me now. Good morning to you. What's meant by that statement, not taking the resilience of students for granted, that the government should not do that?
Well, good morning, first of all. Students, I think, have had a really tough year this year. Many of them have been living at home, probably over 1 million of them, living at home, studying online, and in a very, very isolated environment. And we're now in a position where we have roughly 50% of our students are back on campus because they are doing subjects which require practical work. But what I call the other 50% are still at home. And Universities UK is asking the government, when it makes its decisions about releasing the lockdown restrictions, that it considers these students very, very carefully. We are very concerned about their mental health and well-being, and also about their personal development. And it's not a very comfortable position to have 50% of our students being in this position and the other 50% on campus.
But how prepared are you to welcome back the remainder of these students to campuses?
Universities are very, very well prepared to welcome students back. We've invested huge amounts of money and vast amounts of time in making our campuses truly COVID safe so that we can teach students in a face-to-face environment and students can enjoy other activities in a safe face-to-face environment. I want to stress that there is minimal evidence of transmission in face-to-face learning environments, and the ONS data show that infection rates amongst staff in higher education are very low. All of us have invested in asymptomatic testing facilities on campus, so all of our students are expected to be tested twice a week. And campus infections are very low. I can say in my own university at Brunel, throughout the entire pandemic, the level of infections has been much lower than it has been in the surrounding environment. So I am really concerned, as I said earlier, about students' mental health and well-being. I'm very concerned also about the personal development of students, so much of which depends on those face-to-face human interactions. I run a university where I have a huge number of students from underprivileged backgrounds, and I know only too well it is those personal interactions that help those students develop the confidence and the other skills that perhaps their more privileged peers have already got. And I want to be in a position where I can really help those students, give them extra coaching, give them careers advice, and make sure I'm doing the very best I can to ensure they have the best outcomes from their time at university.
You've mentioned a couple of times your concerns about the mental health of your students. What provisions are being put in place to help them in that respect and have ongoing help?
We have invested a lot in mental health support, so we've expanded our facilities very, very considerably. So we have more counsellors than we've had before, we've got more mental health advisors than we've got before, and we have a whole university approach to mental health and well-being. So all of our staff understand the importance of keeping a very, very close eye on students. And of course, it's much, much easier to do that in a face-to-face environment where you're with the students and you see the students than it is in a remote environment. We also, of course, work closely with the NHS to make sure that students who need medical help can get that help as quickly as we can possibly get it for them. It's not always easy. It can be very difficult, but we certainly invest a huge amount in trying to support mental health. It's one of the things I care about most.
Professor Julia Buckingham, thank you very much for speaking to us this morning. We've got some sound issues there, but we've finished the interview. Thank you. Just some breaking news to bring you now. Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab has issued a statement following sanctions imposed by China on more than a dozen UK individuals and organisations, including Tory MPs. He says it speaks volumes that while the UK joins the international community in sanctioning those responsible for human rights abuses, the Chinese government sanctions its critics. If Beijing want to credibly rebut claims of human rights abuses in Xinjiang, it should allow the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights full access to verify the truth. So the Foreign Secretary thus saying that there should be full access to verify the truth. Time now to take a look at the weather for you with Naz.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
A very good morning to you. So we're heading into a brief cold spell over the next 24 hours or so, with increasingly wintry showers about as well. But to begin with this morning, it's mild across most places, but there are already wintry showers developing and some snow across parts of Scotland, mainly over the high ground there. But there's also a mixture of rain, sleet and snow showers across parts of Ireland and Northern Ireland. Again, the wintry outbreaks mostly across the high ground over these areas. Meanwhile, there's rain across much of Scotland, over parts of the north and west of England and Wales, some showers further south and east. And that band of rain will be clearing for much of Scotland, the north and west of England and Wales by midday, heading across the Midlands, central, southern and eastern England this afternoon. Behind that, it gets colder with increasingly wintry showers, mostly across the high ground, but to some low levels of the north later.